This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
There ain't no road just like it anywhere I found. Running south on Lakeshore Drive, getting into town.
Yeah, you're going to have trouble running south or maybe north on Lakeshore Drive on August 2nd because Reverend Gregory Livingston and his Coalition for New Chicago are planning a Lakeshore Drive shutdown and a march to Wrigley Field to protest the lack of economic vitality on the south and west sides of the city, the violent crime in those neighborhoods as well, sort of a Dan Ryan shutdown redux. This is getting serious now because
it is affecting Cub fans?
Yeah, exactly. You're getting to parts of the city now that people in office actually care about. So they actually may have to pay attention to this, other than just scramble some public resources to protect Flager and the gang on the Dan Ryan. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid Reverend Gregory Livingston, Coalition for New Chicago. Greg, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. You are the mastermind, man. It's always good to talk to you.
I don't know about that.
Did you plan this?
No. Did I plan him calling me the mastermind?
Yeah.
It's just a fact on the streets.
Oh, okay.
So Greg,
Greg,
what do you think this is going to accomplish exactly?
Well, it's going to take a lot, and this is just one thing in a series of things that we have to commit ourselves to doing. I've learned from my failures. I've learned more from failing than I have from not trying. And so, oftentimes in the neglected and challenged neighborhoods, and you made the comment before you brought me on, that the cries of the neglected and the disadvantaged, the complaints are often ignored until there's some kind of lip service given to them during election time. But in better off areas, that the cries and complaints are heard. So we want to bring, the neglected and the disadvantaged to where they can be heard.
So are you going to have the blessing, or not maybe the blessing, but the protection that Father Flager received on the Dan Ryan when they shut that down?
Well, I've been doing this for a minute. No, I've been doing this for a minute. We did, Black Friday and hashtag Black Christmas 3 years ago.
Oh, I remember.
And so we're calling for some real action against Rahm and Eddie Johnson. I really doubt if Rahm's going to give us his approval on this. That looks, and anyway, we're not asking permission because in the tradition of King and Gandhi, it wouldn't be civil disobedience if we would ask for permission. So, yeah.
What about the Cubs? Are you asking for their permission, or are you planning on stopping the game? Because I could get behind that.
You have to wait and see on that end.
All right.
We'll see what happens with that. Yeah.
Well, what's the game plan? Where are you going to start? Where are you going to stop? Are you? Is it the end game, Clark and Addison?
Yeah, we're going to be on northbound Lakeshore Drive at the Belmont exit, and we're going to stop traffic on Lakeshore Drive. Then we're going to march from there to Wrigley Field.
See, now that I've lived there for 22 years in that neighborhood. I understand what you're doing, but I just think that is the wrong way to go about this because people, they might run you over. And I know that sounds awful, but I'm just telling you the truth.
But, Amy, people get run over on the south and west sides all the time. We're used to it. It's not a big deal. And
Are you going to wear bike helmets or something? Or
bike helmet?
Yeah, sure.
When the last time you've been in Lawndale see somebody riding a bike with a bike helmet?
Not since Obama visited.
And my boys don't wear bike helmets either, so it's not just.
We old school,
I know.
Yeah.
Well, but what is the call? Because I've seen some of your other press releases on topic, and you call for Rahm Emanuel to resign. Well, obviously that's not going to happen. You gotta win elections. You gotta change out the political power structure in the city. And how does this further that real effort?
Myself and my co-organizer T.O. Hardiman with Violence Interrupters, we've been neck deep in working with this violence. I'm a pastor of a church. I've done all kind of funerals with short caskets, long caskets, gang funerals with the killer sitting in the congregation. And the sad thing is that that way of life becomes normative. And so we have to expose people to something different.
Mm-hmm.
We want to bring Southsiders and Westsiders, up to the north side to Wrigleyville to show them what well-funded communities look like, to show them what public safety looks like when it functions optimally. So when they go back, they can have a different level of dissatisfaction and say, we need this in our communities. And for the Wrigleyvillians, or however you say that, Granddaddy had a dog, Dan and Amy, and the dog was lying on the porch, and the dog was just whining and crying. And his buddy says, why is that dog crying like that? And Granddaddy says, because he's lying on a nail. He says, why doesn't he move? He said, because it doesn't hurt bad enough yet. We believe that many of our fellow brothers and sisters and citizens don't know what some of us are going through. So we have to make them aware, because I believe in the intrinsic goodness of human beings. I look at a human being before I look at their label. And I think that once they know, and then we can show them how, we want some funding for black-led anti-violence programs. There's so much chicanery and skullduggery out here in the nonprofit world, the political world. I'm tired of political correctness, because our politics is not correct. We've had over 50 people get shot since the weekend. We get this all the time, and Chicago's a laughingstock.
But, trying to shut down a Cubs game, or, vaccine motorists who are trying to get to the game, or even home from work, do you really think that that's going to work and get your message across?
Yeah, I think so. Amy, the legacy of people like Martin King and Gandhi, even Jesus Christ, is that none of them were palatable during their lifetimes. We praise and worship them now because we tend to sanitize what they did. But it takes getting people uncomfortable to make a difference. It takes your doctor saying, look, if you don't change the way you're eating, you're not going to last very long. And as a collective, as a citizen body, one part of the body cannot suffer and the other part of the body not deal with something at some point in time. We have to get the whole body whole.
Well, okay. When you talk about funding for black-led anti-violence programs in the neighborhoods, give me a sense of what that looks like, because this, sort of the never-ending calls for more and more money, taxpayer money usually. I'm not suggesting you're saying that, but it's usually taxpayer money. That's what the calls are. The West and South Side neighborhoods are wholly owned subsidiaries of the government. Give me what the number is that would reduce the violence. Give me where the money should be directed that would reduce the violence. It seems like nobody can ever answer that question.
You know what, Dan? I know that when Ron closed those 50 schools, at one point it was costing $1 million a day to maintain those closed schools. And so, one of our ideas is that you bring in these huge concerns like Google, and you want Amazon here. That's great. That's good. We're all for that. But these companies are coming in with tax incentives and subsidies and abatements and all that kind of stuff. And so they're being subsidized by the taxpayers in order to get them here. Mm-hmm. And so we're saying these cash-rich companies, let's take some of these closed schools and these buildings and these ramshackle places. Let these cash-rich companies invest in these buildings in the community, turn them into digital training centers. And that way you employ the community, the kids of the 21st century already, technology is normative to them. And let's do something creative and let's have vision. And when I talk about black-led, there's a game in the community, Dan. I just got to be straight up with you, man. There's a game in the community, and I can tell you this for a fact. The fifth floor oftentimes only deals with people that will say yes all the time. Mm-hmm. And many of the folk that are in charge or have been in charge of black organizations that don't have any money are not going to sell their integrity in order to get a buck, right? So we need to move outside of the taxpayer base and go to some of these corporate giants and bring this money in. A number would be to have some money that doesn't have strings attached to the fifth floor that says, I'm going to puppeteer you like I puppeteered the illegitimately hired Eddie Johnson.
What about the schools, since you brought them up? You have this sex abuse scandal that has been unearthed by the Tribune at CPS. And where is the reaction to that? The CPS is 90% minority. It's overwhelmingly right. African American. Most of the schools do not educate children, do not put them on a path to success, and they haven't for generations. Where is the outrage over that? Have Google and Amazon and LinkedIn and whatever, have them take over the schools. Don't just fund digital centers. Start from pre-K. in the city of Chicago because CPS isn't getting it done. And now we find out CPS was aiding and abetting predators. And there's nary a march or a vigil or a shutdown orchestrated to protest that.
You know what? It's hard a lot of times, Dan, to get people together to come up against something when they feel they already have lost, right? They don't even want to play the game. How can we beat this team? You know, we
like the
might as
Republican
well
Party.
not play.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work to inspire them, to inspire the uninspired. I mean, it takes a lot of work. And it's difficult and it's hard. And then we come up against formidable forces, you know. I mean, the Emmanuel brothers have put together this incredible Machiavellian empire, man. I mean, it's off the chain, you know. But you know, it's hard. And so all I can say is that we just keep trying and keep fighting. You know, black women have experienced, you know, sexual abuse in this country, America, since we've been here, and their coping mechanism, because they didn't have a choice, they couldn't go to a counselor or take a day off, you know, in slavery or something like that. They learned to compartmentalize it, right? I'm not saying that's the healthy thing to do. And so often, though, I believe that legacy is carried over even into this millennia, where many of these young black girls and black boys who have been sexually abused in the CPS system, the parents, you know, are worried about losing what little they have. This is not to make an excuse, but it's just to say this is the reality that exists. I've had parents come to me and say, please don't say anything. Please don't, because of fear.
It's a sad reality.
Yeah, it is. But real quick, you'd mentioned Eddie Johnson. That superintendent, he walked hand in hand with you guys during the Dan Ryan demonstration.
No, I didn't. I wasn't on the Dan Ryan.
No, he. Okay, well, he was. What beef do you have with Eddie Johnson?
Eddie Johnson promised transparency, and he's playing games with the COPA decisions. Eddie Johnson said that in his entire career he never saw discrimination in the Chicago Police Department, but he still sent officers to racial sensitivity training. Eddie Johnson and I attended the same high school and grammar school. This isn't easy for me, but we both got our big boy pants on. Enough. You know, Rahm hired him. You know, he didn't go through the process. Rahm suspended the law for a day. Another great example of Chicago corruption. He suspended, you know, the law for a day to bring his guy in. And so now, you know, we get, you know, like the Rialmo decision, and the community just says, you need a backbone, Eddie. But if you don't have a backbone, let us do the process over again and bring somebody in here who does.
All right. He is Reverend Gregory C. Livingston, Coalition for a New Chicago. They're marching on Lakeshore Drive to Wrigley Field Thursday, August 2nd. So mark your calendars. Greg, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mastermind. Bye, Amy.
Right.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.